Um, Good evening, everyone. It's April 13th, 2020, and this is Jennifer Patterson. My camera is off for better sound quality. I'm calling to order the special board meeting of the Concord School Board, and we're meeting today with the primary purpose of voting on the budget. Our agenda is posted on the SAU 8 website in the usual location, and I'll go through the agenda in a moment. First, I need to go through a statement on this emergency meeting and remote participation. As president of the Concord School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's executive order number 12 pursuant to emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are first providing public access to this meeting by telephone, with additional access by video and other electronic means. Specifically, we're using Microsoft Teams for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by dialing 925-391-1169 with a conference ID of 413-501-867#, by clicking on the link that's provided on the SAU 8 website, or by watching the meeting on CCTV's education channel, which is Comcast Channel 6, or also Concord NHTV on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will also be posted on the CCTV's website. During this meeting, the board will take public comment in accordance with District Policy number 136. We'll do that by unmuting phone lines one by one during the public comment period. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Please make your comments shorter if possible to allow all interested parties to comment. As always, we encourage the submission of citizen comments via email at concordinfo@sau8.org. We did previously give public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting using Microsoft Teams or telephonically. The meeting and pertinent instructions were posted in a legal notice that ran in the Concord Monitor on March 24, 2020, and the instructions have also been provided on the website of the board at sau8.org. We do have a mechanism for the public to alert us if there are any problems with access during the meeting. If anyone has a problem with access during the meeting, they should call 603-513-9008. And we will attempt to fix any problems with access. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, then we will adjourn and reschedule the meeting. So next, I want to move to a roll call of board members participating. All members will be participating remotely, and all votes that are taken during this meeting will be by roll call vote. So I'll go through the list of members. When you state your presence, please also state whether there's anyone else in the room with you during the meeting, because that is required under the right to know law. And we also ask, as I think most of you have done, that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and that you wait to be recognized. And I'll certainly recognize every board member. So let me go through the roll. Ms. Cannon, are you present?
I am. I'm having some technical difficulties on this end, but I can hear and I can speak, and I am here alone in my guest room.
Great. Thank you so much, and I hope your technical difficulties resolve, and let us know if they don't, so that we can make sure you're able to participate. Mr. Croto, are you present?
I am present. I am alone, and I can hear and speak.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Croto. Mr. Crush, are you present? Mr. Crush, your microphone is muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, I am present, I am alone, and I can hear.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Higgins, are you present?
I am here. All of the above stand true for me as well.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Parker, are you present?
I'm here alone and ready to go.
Thank you so much. Ms. Poinier, are you present?
Yep, I'm here. I can hear, and I'm alone. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ms. Poinier. Mr. Richards, are you present?
I am here, I am alone in this room, and I can hear everyone just fine.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Smith, are you present? And Ms. Smith had informed me that she may be a little late to the meeting, so when she arrives, we will note the time that she arrives. And I'm Jennifer Patterson. I am present, I am alone, and I can hear just fine. So next I'll turn to Dr. Bass and Jack Dunn just to confirm the district staff. First, who's present at the SAU location, and then next, what district staff are participating remotely.
Sure. Jack Dunn, Business Administrator, here at in the boardroom, along with Interim Superintendent Frank Bass.
And I think your microphone is muted too right now.
He is correct. That's right. Sorry, yep, it is muted. So it's Jack Dunn, Business Administrator for the district in the Dewey Room, along with Superintendent Frank Bass.
Great, thank you so much. And if, I know that there are some district staff, if
Yep.
you could
Larry
just go through and identify yourselves, that would be helpful as well.
Even better.
Larry Prince is here.
Matt Cashman is here.
Donna Pally.
Great. So is that Larry, Matt, and Donna, any other district staff?
That's all I see.
Okay, so now we are ready to move into review and approval of the agenda. As I noted at the beginning of the meeting, the agenda is posted on the website. We are first going to have an update on the superintendent search. That will be very brief. That's not a voting item. Then I will give a brief summary of the public comment that we've received on the budget via email, as we've been really encouraging people to submit their comments via email. I thought it would be helpful. Then we will take public comment on agenda items only. And then next, we will discuss and vote on the 2021 budget. After that, we will have a vote on administrator and teacher contracts, and then we have a discussion of possible changes to the spring 2020 school calendar due to the COVID-19 emergency. Then if there's any other business, and that we will take it up, and then we will adjourn. So that is the agenda. It is posted on the slide in front of us, and I would entertain a motion to approve that agenda.
Jenny, I move we approve the agenda.
Great, thank you, Jim. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it. Barb.
Great, so moved by Jim, seconded by Barb. I will take a roll call vote on the agenda. Ms. Cannon? We'll circle back to Ms. Cannon, possible technical difficulties. Although your microphone is muted right now. Mr. Croto?
Aye.
Mr. Crush?
Aye.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Mr. Parker?
I'm here.
You vote to approve the agenda? Mr. Parker?
I do. I approve the agenda.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fournier?
Aye.
Mr. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Smith? I do not think Ms. Smith has arrived. Chair votes aye. Ms. Cannon, are you able to vote? We're not hearing Ms. Cannon, but we do have a majority approval of the agenda. So the next item is an update on the superintendent search process, and for that, I will turn to Tom Proto, who is leading that process, as well as Jack Dunn. So, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. So last Wednesday, Jack and I met virtually with our candidates and invited them, talked to them briefly, and very good conversations. Invited them to meet with us as a board, which happened this Wednesday.
Now joining.
As you saw from Jack and Jack's great work of getting the notes out, that we're going to meet on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 5:30, and have more discussions with them, but most importantly for the board members to meet the candidates, asking questions, and perhaps moving forward in a direction to set some timelines and ideas about how we move forward next. So we're looking forward to that.
Great, thank you, Tom. And again, that meeting on Wednesday will be a non-public meeting, but there will be ample public opportunities to meet the candidates later in the process, which has been elongated with COVID-19.
Absolutely true, and I would also defer to Jack just in case there was something there that happened and I missed.
Eliza got kicked off. Nope, Tom, I think you covered it. It'll be a fruitful conversation for you on Wednesday night.
Yeah,
Great, great. Well, thank you to both of you.
you're most welcome.
So I'm trying having my camera on. I feel weird with it off, but if people can't hear me, please let me know. I really want to have good sound quality. So next is a summary of public comments that we've received on the budget. As everyone knows, this process has become very challenging due to the COVID-19 situation, and we really want to make sure that we have heard all of the public input that we can and that we incorporate it into our deliberations tonight. So we did have a number of work sessions where we received public comment. I will not summarize those, but we received a fair amount of email, and I just wanted to make sure board members have seen these emails, but I wanted to make sure that we were all reminded of them, and then we consider them later this evening when we talk about the budget. So I would kind of separate the email correspondence that we received into three main categories. The first was support from parents and other members of the community for specific portions of the budget, and specifically we heard a fair amount from folks supporting the future of the deaf position and the school nurses. I personally received emails from 4 different families of students who are served by the teacher of the deaf position, who expressed their strong appreciation for the person in the position, explained how critical those services are to those students' ability to access the curriculum, that they felt that there should not be a cut in the hours of that position, that it would be better to increase the hours further, but at a minimum that it could be kept as it was really proposed. So the current person serves at a 60% FTE level. What had been proposed in the budget was 80%. And so that was what folks were advocating for, was at least the 80%. We also had some conversations earlier in the work sessions about the school nurses, and we did receive an email, again, from a family member, just reiterating the importance of the work that school nurses do and the expanded scope of that work with the current student populations that are being served. So that was one category of emails. A second category of emails, and really a very significant conversation that we had as a board, and that is reflected in the minutes, had to do with student services, special education, the Bill White services, kind of in brief summary, and again, I know we'll talk about this more later on. We heard from parents with concerns about whether IEP services were being provided. We heard from staff about safety concerns. There were questions that were raised about kind of the effectiveness, the philosophy, the long-term vision of the Bill White services. There were questions that were raised about the best ways to deliver services and to staff these positions. And the comments generally reflected the need to kind of restore confidence and to have a clear vision and clear roles in the area of special education and student services. Just as background information, I think board members are aware of this, but just to make sure that the public is also aware of it, and we talked about it a little bit, I think, at our monthly meeting, in view of the complexity of the conversation that was going on this issue in the budget context, Dr. Bass started a conversation with an ad hoc group that was looking at the possibility of doing an overall review of the program, which would include input from all stakeholders and the creation of revisions. That conversation was interrupted due to the COVID-19 emergency, but there is a proposal that will be presented to the board and to the public at the board's May monthly meeting. So regardless of what direction we end up going on the budget tonight on this issue, that conversation will be occurring at the May meeting as well, and I wanted people to be aware of that. And then the last category of public comment that we received from the public were really a fair amount of comments that commended the budget reductions that were made and proposed in response to the COVID-19 situation, and urging that further reductions be made in view of the situation and the potential impact on taxpayers. And so specifically, we've heard from stakeholders that option A of the two options we'll be considering later tonight is the only way to go, given the vast insecurities and the outcomes of the pandemic. The board should not add to the taxpayers' pain, and advocating that even option A could be pared down further. We also heard from another stakeholder who was delighted to see that the proposed budget had been reduced, and hoping that we would consider even more reductions given the possible kind of extended time period for remote learning. So that was the end of my summary, and just in case other board members have other input that they received from the public that they want to bring forward, so we can talk about when we have the conversation later. Hey, go ahead.
This is a naive question, but where do we have access to those letters?
So those were all emails that were sent to board members. I have them. I think that you received them. I know, Dave, there was an issue with your email address, so I tried to forward to you everything that I had because it had been sent to the incorrect.
I didn't get anything, actually, so.
Huh. So these were things that were received over a period of like March, February through March through April. So we can try and share them with you. And if you have specific questions about anything that I mentioned, I can give you more detail because I do have a document that I can open that has there. But I think all the other board members did receive that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that I have, and
Okay.
makes it a little challenging. And yeah. So anyway.
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I have an SAU email, and then I have a Parker Academy email, and I know there was some challenges, but and maybe I just didn't see it, but I'm looking down through all my correspondence. In any case, don't worry about me. I'll move on at this point, but I don't know. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad I summarized it because I'm glad to know that you didn't get those, and we'll try to work through that. I know that your email address is D.A. Parker, not D. Parker, so I think that some of the members of the public may have used an incorrect address, so I think that's a technical issue that we'll need to address going forward. I thought it had been addressed, but maybe it hadn't been. Was there other public input that board members wanted to, that board members received that I didn't mention, other than, other than Dave's comment? Okay. So I think at this time, we will move on to public comments on agenda items, which primarily would be the budget. So Jack, I will turn it over to you to see if there are any members of the public who would wish to comment on the budget.
Okay. Let me just go down. Okay, Miss Willingham.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Just make sure there isn't somebody that I don't recognize. Someone's logged on as Steve. Any comment? Going again. Steve, any comment?
Jack, you might run over the way to unmute. Perhaps he's busy muted.
Interesting. Nope. It says muted, but I can't undo them, so I'm not sure if that's somebody or not.
No comment.
No comment. All right, sounds good. There they go. That's all I see from the right there. Nothing else.
Okay, well, thank you, Jack.
No problem.
So at this point, let me turn it over to you and Frank, and you can do the brief presentation on the budget, and then we can move into the board's discussion.
Okay. Am I good? All right. So this is where we are on our agenda. We've tried to keep it paced so to knock off what you have already accomplished, and we'll move on to the budget discussion. So we presented the budget on February 10th during the public hearings, and right after the posting of the budget, the significant impact of the COVID-19 on the economy. The administration had brought forward some adjustments, and that first adjustment is option A, which would show a 1.78% increase in the budget. It would include these positions to be added and positions to be cut. What you see in the 210.35 column is what was proposed in the initial budget and what was posted, and what you see on 330 is what the proposed change was. So we went from a $1.5 million add to a $45,000 add. That's option A. Now I highlight those in yellow because that's how they correspond to option B. You'll see that. So, So option B is a 2.08% increase. And that includes these positions, but adds back 2 of the professional staff at the elementary level. It reduces the total of 10 non-certified staff, and this one adds back the professional staff to be determined at run level.
Just to get some clarification on the positions being added back, I know the board's aware of this, but the public is not. I think as you recall, when I talked about this last week, I said to be determined because I wanted to talk to everybody and get a feel for what made the most sense going forward. And so what we proposed is a full-time social worker to be split between Krista McAuliffe and Abbott Downing, and a full-time school psychologist to be split between Abbott Downing and Krista McAuliffe. So those where those 2 positions would go. The net result of those additions would give actually a full-time social worker at each building, because it already had a half, and nearly a full-time school psychologist at each building, because they nearly had a half apiece. So that takes care of the 2 of the positions. The third position would be a special ed position at the middle school level. So that would be the 3 positions that account for option B.
Okay. If there's no questions, I'm going to move on. All right. These were some of the additional expenses and revenue adjustments that we made because of the economic situation. And then option A and option B's tax impact.
Jack, can you tell him what it's gonna be for a house that's about 250,000?
Yeah, a house, Frank had asked what would it be on a $250,000 home. I believe option A is $27 and option B is $45, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. Okay. Now this was the other piece that we were going to fill in for tonight, which is other considerations, discussions, and answer to board requests. I'll try to go through this quickly. So initially for year end, right now we're looking at revenue for food service, the fresh fruit and vegetable program, and that we were just recently notified that we will need to pay the employees who are not working in the food service program but are employed by food service need to be paid for by the general fund. If they're not working, we can't pay them out of the food service fund. We're going to provide some pushback to that because the grants seem to be allowing it, and why the USDA is not. We're going to try to find out some more. I just wanted to show you one revenue comparison. To last year, we did $108,119 for a claim. This year, we from the 2nd to the 13th, which is when we were in school, we did $52,000, and then from the 16th to the 31st, we did $16,000. And that's because we're delivering the food and every meal is reimbursable. But you can see that it's dropped significantly, but we anticipate the expenses should have dropped somewhat because we're not buying as much food. But the fixed costs are the employees. We anticipate revenue reductions in athletics, building rental, and tuition. We're likely, because typically the devices don't go home at the elementary and middle school level, that the remote learning will have an impact on lost and damaged items, and we're going to have to orchestrate some type of check-in in the event school does not return, because we're going to need to get this equipment back. We're not going to be able to let that equipment sit out all summer and then expect the tech staff and the tech integrators and everybody to get the equipment up and running for the first day of school. Plus stuff will disappear. So we're going to have to start coordinating something to get all this equipment back. But also, we expect unspent funds. If I remember, in this budget, we're anticipating a $2.1 million unreserved fund balance at the end of the year. I expect that, even with this, to be slightly higher, but we don't want that to fool you that that extra money means that's good, because what happens is these are expenses that we didn't incur, but will likely incur next year. So you don't want to create any false reductions that come back and bite you in next year's budget. Mm-hmm. So we will be looking for the board to make some decisions in June when we anticipate what that unreserved fund balance is. We'll be able to project where it's coming from, for example, if there's energy accounts, and make proposals to put money away so we don't create a spike next year. For the FY21 budget, we're looking at negotiations for 4 collective bargaining agreements that will be funded in FY22. Still got capital improvements with Runlet still something to be looked at, and other facility improvements. We may see an increase in enrollment due to these economic events, because those that go to private school may now opt out and come back to the public school. If you remember that from the demographic study, that is something that was seen when we had the last economic downturn. So just something to think about. Again, anticipate revenue reductions in athletics, building rental, and tuition, same in FY21. Food service, we're having discussions about, will there be increased need free and reduced lunch services, more applications, more services for free and reduced because of the economy. This summer, for compensatory services for special education, will we have expenses incurred to do that? And I have a slide for answers to board requests. There were several that were made, and I'll answer those in the next slide. In 2 slides from now, sorry. For FY22, which is the year I'm more worried about, we have 4 groups negotiating. New Hampshire Retirement is right now doing a experience study, and the contribution rates will be set for July 1, 2021, which will affect the 22 budget. I have been, it's my understanding that pension funds around the country are reducing their rate of return, and reducing the rate of return ultimately contributes somewhere that money has to come from, which will result likely in increased rates. We also have one-time state funding that will end at the end of the 21 budget. Right now we have an additional $900,000 in state funds. What's going to happen after this economic downturn, we don't know. On the city side, they still have a budget that they have to pass. You have the commercial and residential real growth, although that tax ended 3/31. They're doing that assessment, and we'll get that number in October. And as we anticipate revenue reductions, I'm going to guess that they're going to see revenue reductions right now. County, same thing, budget and revenue. On the state side, what will be the economic impact of the COVID-19? The reduction in funding, again, those one-time funds that we received over these 2 budgets, will that continue? As you remember, when we finalized the budget in October, we talked about that $138 million that went to schools, and that the New Hampshire School Boards Association warned about this is one-time funding. Again, as I mentioned, New Hampshire Retirement System, that assessment is going on right now. Again, we won't see that impact till July 1, but those rates will likely be published in September of 20. Biannual budget will be starting next year for the FY22 budget. And I'm going to guess with meals and room tax, tourism, lottery, which helps fund education, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the state revenues are down. I have no insight into that, just a guess. On the federal side, we may see some one-time stimulus funds, which could be equivalent to 85% of our Title I funds. What we can use that for, we're told it could have some broad usage, but we don't know all the details. The state sent out a request this past week asking for districts to get together what they think they would spend that on. I need to have that to them by Wednesday. So that's been our task the last few days, but I need to finalize that tomorrow and submit that so the state has some idea what we're looking at if these funds come to fruition, which my understanding is they're in the stimulus bill. Grant funding, what all that looks like. We anticipate our grants will not be fully spent. What will they let us do with that money? Will they increase the carryover? Will we have to reprioritize? Will they create competitive grants? All things that we're keeping an eye out for. And then infrastructure funding. I think that's been the next $1 trillion round that they're discussing about infrastructure. Need I say Renlet? And now I'll only mention that because the last time there was an economic downturn, we built 3 middle schools. 3 elementary schools, not 3 middle schools, sorry. Board request, there was the discussion about JV hockey. I wanted to show you what's in the budget, and what we would do is hold that and review that program with the board, right, with this ultimate decision being finalized by the October monthly board meeting, so that they can determine whether they're moving forward or what they're doing. Right. Okay? It was also asked about the athletic program, reviewing all programs and fees. We will do that as well during this period of time. For Bill White has been reached out to. The district already receives a discounted rate, and he had asked if all vendors are being asked the same question to reduce their fees or hold their fees. And for the Medicaid reimbursement about the OT, a student must be Medicaid eligible, parent must give permission to bill Medicaid, and we must have a medical authorization for service. And we would receive 50% of an hourly rate that is set by the state. Any questions?
Thank you, Jack. So let's.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Yes, hang on one second. process I'd like to follow. Let's ask all the questions that we need to, and then briefly, for those new members, this is the time when we actually go around and each board member says what they think, so I'm gonna wanna make sure everyone has the opportunity to speak and give their thoughts, before we start. So, please be advised, everybody will get the opportunity to speak. But let's ask questions first. So Dave, was that you who wanted to ask a question?
Well, I'm just curious, when Bill White says we already get reduced fees, how do we determine whether or not, that's accurate? How do we judge, have our fees gone up consistently over the years? Have they not? What is he using as a benchmark to adjust those fees? I'm still under some reservation that we haven't clearly defined what professionals are working with our children and what's the certification and certification and professional level of the employees, of the staff that we're hiring. So how do we determine whether or not his fees have been adjusted, and how do we come up with that decision without any sort of factual information?
So thank you for that question, Dave. I don't know, Donna, if you're the best person to speak to that, or maybe Jack, I'll defer to whichever of you would like to answer that.
This is Donna. I'm not sure that I can pull out the yearlies on these over time. That would be another piece to look at across time. But he did explain about the costs of his staff, and what he charges other districts is different necessarily than what he charges us. And so we can certainly do a more robust study of that, but in terms of looking over many years.
So Donna, do his hourly rates go up every year, or is it at a fixed rate? That's the piece that, I hear that what we're saying is it's already a discounted rate as compared to other districts, but do they in fact increase every year, or are they static?
I'm sorry that I'm not sure at the hourly rate level, but I believe that the charge that for those individuals, that we broke out the different lists of individuals in a very early presentation, that those salaries have not gone up in any substantial way. I'm not sure about the hourly on the consultation piece. I'd have to look over some years on that.
Okay, thank you, Donna.
Well, I would like to have that factual information, because you're expecting us to believe that this is being scrutinized when it's really ambivalent to me. It's really, I'm not certain that this is, where the numbers are. It just seems, seems unusual. Mm-hmm. It seems like a typical business response, but I'm not trying to be specifically critical to Bill White. It just seems very ambiguous here.
I'm sorry, it's Dawn again. I think that Jack could probably speak to this, that most of the costs, like ours do, people get raises and that sort of thing. So I think the costs for placements, district placements, contractors do tend to go up over time, because like all of us, their rates that they pay people change, or their health insurance, different kinds of things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see over a long time that those have gone up, just like pretty much everything we buy has gone up. But I don't have the specifics on Bill White's.
I think it would be good, this is Barb Higgins here, I think it would be good for that to be transparent. The Bill White situation has been not controversial, but contentious on and off over the years, and this is a big chunk of money. And we're asking for a lot of things in this budget, even with our wonderful cuts and things that have been done to alleviate the burden on taxpayers. Invisible money doesn't feel good to me either. And I'm a special educator, so it's not like I want those children to suffer, but I do feel we have to balance our responsibilities between the children's needs and who's paying for them and how they're being paid for. So some transparency on that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, and this is Chuck, if I could just kind of chime in on that. And I think what we were asking Mr. White is for things to stay stagnant. And I understand salaries go up, cost of doing business does increase, but given our relationship and the amount of long-term relationship and the amount of money that we have spent with Mr. White over the years, we're asking him to absorb some costs during this time to lessen the burden upon taxpayers. So I think that's what I'd like to know to kind of support what Dave and what Dave is saying and what Barb is saying.
So thank you, Dave, Barb, and Chuck, and I will now see whether Jack and Frank have anything to add in response.
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on that. I mean, I think, at this late stage of the game, it's very difficult to come up with exact figures about what people are being paid and what the increases were from last year or the year before. Do I think that we have to do that at some point? Absolutely. I think as we go forward and look at the Bill White program, and as we've already said, a huge chunk of money is being appropriated every year for that program, we need some answers in terms of what are the costs in terms of the ratio year over year, and are they going up? Why are they going up? What are the services are we getting, and how can we effectively evaluate those services in terms of how do we see growth in terms of where our students are going, and is all the things that Bill White says he is doing or the program is claiming to have happen, is that really in fact the case? And we don't know that per se right now without actually doing an exhaustive study, but I think that has to be done. And I guess that's, not a guess, that is the reason why I'm really stressing that we look at this outside agency to do an exhaustive analysis of both the Bill White program and the special ed program, because student services is a big part of what we do here in Concord. And when you put those two programs together, Bill White and student services, you're looking at a lot of money. And I think, we want to have an understanding that we have the best possible services at a reasonable rate of cost. I mean, that's really the bottom line here. But I can't be done now. I think that has to take some time, and that's why I would strongly suggest, we do that. If you don't go with the outside agency, then we'd have to do an exhaustive study ourselves independently to say, okay, what are these costs, and how do we know that they're actually achieving what we think they're achieving? So those are my sentiments on that.
Great, thank you. And Gina has a question. So, Gina?
Yeah, so I'm coming actually over the phone. I don't know whether you can hear me.
I hear you. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So, Jack, I'm looking at the proposed budget that we posted back in March, and I think if I'm not incorrect, the Bill White line item number is $63,200, and we're looking at about a 12.31% increase over last year, if I've got the right line item.
Thank you, Gina. And I guess the question is that an increase due to increased services or increased rates? And I think that's the question that board members have. I don't know, I think to Dr. Bass's point, whether we'll be able to get answers tonight in conjunction with this budget vote, but we certainly do intend to get answers when we look at the program overall.
Right.
Yeah, no, I don't think we'll have answers tonight, but I think Bill White's response speaks volumes.
Right. Fair enough.
Yep. No, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Are there other questions before we begin our discussion? Dave, do you have a question?
Well, I just have one question. It is true. There's nothing that we can do about this now, but and I am again all for supporting special education. We had a public outcry about managing behavior in our schools, and part of the Bill White program, as I understand it in my very limited way, is that was in some ways we were paying an outside vendor to manage for some of these kids and some of these specifically autistic kids that aren't necessarily causing behavior. But again, without being able to evaluate the program, it's hard to be able to say, are we paying an appropriate amount of money, or are all these additional staff members we're trying to add are going to make the difference? The whole efficacy of that student support, I realize we're going to put it under scrutiny and under study, and that's really important, but we are on good faith spending a significant amount of money with that program, and I'm concerned about that, obviously. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you, Dave.
Hey, Jenny, this is Chuck, if I could ask a question.
Yep, go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you. Going in a little different direction than Bill White. So I was wondering, because there's been a lot of our public comment and several of the points I've brought up at the last couple meetings, and a lot of the public comment have been about the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing and making the position from a 0.6 to a 0.8. People have pointed out, well, it's not in the proposed budget as a 0.8. I'm wondering if either Jack or Dr. Bass could kind of discuss the current status of that for people's knowledge to maybe alleviate some fears and prevent some further frustration or concern.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the last meeting, Dr. Bass said that it would be grant funded, not general fund funded, so it will not impact the taxpayers locally. So it will be put in the grant and then reevaluated next year, because it's
But
when
it
we
will be a 0.8 under the grant.
That's
right. We will add a 0.2, which is I think about
Yeah.
$32,000. Yes,
Yep.
under a grant.
I just wanted to clarify. I was aware, but I wanted to clarify because people still seem to have questions.
Yep.
Yep.
Nope, you're right, Chuck.
So we usually, when we do grant positions, we put them in as 1 year only.
Yep, no, I understand. Thank you both.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Chuck, for asking the question, and thank you, Jack. And I think on the slide, you have it there, but it's like crossed out, which I think is to indicate that it's in the grant, but I think it's helpful to have that clarification. Other questions before we begin the discussion of the budget? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand, so here's what I'm thinking in terms of how we do this. And obviously, like everything else, it's going to be different this year. So for those of you who've been on the board for a while, this is kind of the most amazing part of being on the board, because we have a conversation and we kind of hash out what we think we should do based on the comment we've received. And it's always been a really great discussion among board members. I think it's going to be harder this year, which is kind of a bummer, but just because, I mean, number one, we are faced with such uncertainty. In some ways, it's a little bit similar to the year when we really wanted to do full-day kindergarten, but we knew we had to wait due to the circumstances. I think what's challenging is that the circumstances have arisen very quickly in the middle of our budget process, and that makes it really hard. And I think that was why, from my perspective, it seemed like it might be helpful to have two options that we could focus on and to decide as a board between the two options. Not that we have to. I mean, we could get more creative, but it just becomes very difficult under the circumstances, I think. So what I was thinking we could do is just go through and have each board member speak and give their thoughts and have a conversation before we have the vote, if that sounds agreeable to board members. And if there is someone saying something, if there is someone who wishes to go first, they should raise their hand. But I do want to make sure each board member is recognized so we can have this conversation. Is there any board member that wants to start off the conversation?
I'll do it. Why not?
Okay.
It's me, Barb. So in general, this is difficult because I'm looking at a screen full of words and I'm not looking at people's faces, and I'm not able to peruse things in a normal way. So I'm going to give my general opinion and feeling around money and how we spend it. And I know that it may not be specific to our budget, but it will give the public an idea of where I'm coming from in my decisions. I am most often not a big supporter of a heavy administration. I think too many administrators and assistant principals and chair people and all of this takes away from the ease and flow of education in schools. I'm also I have a degree in special education and 20 years in special ed. Those kids are my kids, and so I go round and round sometimes with what we're doing as a board in a district to service our most needy children. As you all know, I was not a big fan of all these assistant principals taking away from special ed coordinators. So I come from that vein. But I do feel that we need to go with option A on our budget. It's a much less expensive option for our taxpayers. And quite frankly, there's so much up in the air with the upcoming school year and what we may or may not need. I do feel that this budget will be a work in progress all the way until the very end. And I think that my general overall feeling is that we need to take the least expensive option right now, even though the positions that I'm not supporting are special ed positions. I just need, I just want everyone to know that in the balance here, that, who knows what's going to happen and how we're going to utilize resources and staff and everything else. And I just think that right now, with so many people out of work and our tax base likely suffering, that the most important thing we can do as a school board is to acknowledge all members of our school community, which are not just the teachers and the students, but the people that pay for this as well. So my general overall feeling about our budget is we really have no choice but to choose option A and really try to find that balance in the weeks and months to come.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Gina, I think you're raising your hand.
Yes, thank you. I'm sort of along the lines that Barb is, but I'm even more conservative. Because my concern is how many people are out of work right now. We don't know when those people or if those people are going to have jobs when this is over. I think option B is not really a realistic option in this financial situation. The other piece is that I would like to actually modify option A. And again, I'm not sure of the process of doing that, but I would like to see the money set aside for some of those positions and not actually filled at this time. We have a new superintendent, hopefully, coming aboard, and I don't think that it is the right time to load a bunch of new positions into the school district, effectively tying the new superintendent's hands. He or she may or may not think that those are the places that those positions need to be. I'm not saying we don't set aside or put a thumbnail or a paperclip in the budget for that, but that we do not actually hire for those right now. And I don't know what the process of that is, but I'm looking at, I don't think that we want the special education teachers 5 or 3 plus the social worker and the PhD and the other social worker. I don't know how they do their job if come the fall we're still doing remote learning. I don't know how the occupational therapist does their job come the fall if there's remote learning.
Cut it more.
So I'm not saying we don't need those people. We do need those people. I do think, going back to Betty Hoadley's, I think some of those people are definite needs. Some of them I think are wants. But for right now, I don't think it's fair to back our new superintendent into, we've already hired all these people, and now you have to use them. The only person I would say that we need, there are stuff. We have to fund the nurses. We absolutely, in my opinion, have to fund the nurses, the floater and the dedicated nurse, and we have to fund the Krista McAuliffe teacher. There's no choice on that. We have to fund the compliance officer. We don't have a choice on that, or at least I don't feel like we have a choice on that. But I would also like to have us consider whether it's grants or whether it's partial grant and partial budget, but bringing the teacher of the deaf up to full time. What I've heard through those letters, and I'm really sorry, Dave, that you didn't get a chance to see them, is that this woman goes above and beyond in her part-time job. That
I just read them.
A full-time job. Sorry?
Okay.
So, Gina, I forwarded the letters to Dave, so.
I just read them.
Oh, okay. Okay. People have said this woman goes above and beyond. She works on Saturdays, she works on the weekends, she works at night. She works more than a full-time job for a less than a full-time salary to make sure our kids get what they need. And I, for one, would like to see that funded. whether that's partially through a grant or partially through the budget this year, or however it's done. But the other positions, if it's possible, I'd like to see, can we just maybe approve the budget, but put a thumbnail in those, put a, I hate to use this term, put a pin in it for finding out what the new superintendent needs.
So Gina, thank you for your comments, and I'll go out on a limb, but I'll let Jack jump in if I'm wrong. But I think that what you're suggesting is eminently possible. I think that we would do it by approving option A, but directing the administration not to fill certain positions immediately. Jack, is that true?
Yes.
Great.
This is Larry. Excuse me. This is Larry. The only thing I don't have an issue with it, but you have to remember the later we wait during the school year, the harder it is going to be to get a pool of qualified candidates. If we're hiring in September, October, or whenever, they're gone. You know, you're not going to get that pool that you typically would if you hire in the spring for the following year. I'm not suggesting that's not going to, solve the problem, but I just want folks to know that's going to be, a result of holding off and waiting to hire. That's all.
Great. No, thank you, Larry. And I think it's a conversation that we can have as a board going forward, maybe preliminarily tonight, and then maybe again in May about which positions need to be hired for immediately and which ones we are wanting to hold back on until we understand a little bit better what the circumstances will be.
This is a question for Larry. If we do hire those people, aren't we obligated to pay them contractually, whether we need them or not?
Yes, yeah, we issue them a contract. We are obligated, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Dave. So I'd like to hear from some other board members. I want to make sure everyone gets to speak. Is there someone who would like to speak next?
Hey, Jenny, it's Chuck. I'll speak.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Go ahead.
All right, yeah. So, interestingly enough, so far, I guess I'm going to stand in the minority in supporting option B. My logic is when we post the budget we posted prior to the COVID-19 crisis and disaster, which has had significant impact on human life as well as economic life, we posted a budget with a lot of positions. We sat through a lot of school board meetings, public comment with administrators, teachers, faculty coming forward saying we need these positions in order to support our students. We just came off a horrific experience. For those of you that were on the board prior to this year, but are fully aware, both I know Gina and Dave are very much up to speed. We came off a year of something that was unprecedented. It's something that I think profoundly changed our district and profoundly changed who we are as a board and certainly profoundly changed who I am as a person. With that said, the number one thing that screamed at me throughout that process is we need to make sure we have an infrastructure in place to support our students. I think that, look, I understand that right now that we are reeling with COVID-19. Trust me, the stock market is, I get heart palpitations every day. With that said, I think we need to remember COVID-19 is going to also have an emotional, psychological impact on our students. For the economic impact it will have on our budget, I think option B with the additional positions of the psychologist, of the social worker, are needed, and we need to move forward with those in order to support our students. I am cognizant of the impact on the taxpayer. I know it's a lot of people out of work. It's a hard, difficult time. It's a time of uncertainty. It's a challenging time. But I'm a firm believer that, the sun will rise again. Things will profoundly change, hopefully for the better. We don't know when that is. I wish we did. But also I'm a profound believer is we've got to support our students. and this is hard on our families and our students. Our district is doing a phenomenal job with remote learning, unparalleled in the state, is what I'm understanding.
Thank you.
But you know what? Those students there's still things going on in homes. There's still things going on with students. Students have need, and we're going to be playing catch up in the coming year.
Agreed.
And I think we do need those key positions in order to maintain the current welfare of those students, both academically, emotionally, and spiritually. So that's why I'm a supporter of option B.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jim, Tom? Who else do we have? I don't know that Danielle has arrived yet. Liza, would anyone like to speak?
Yeah, sure. I would say I am, I think we have such an something balancing act here to manage, and while it's really difficult to imagine hiring a bunch of people and then they don't get to even start working for however many months, I agree with Chuck on the fact that, we need the social worker and the psychologist. We probably could use 20 social workers and 20 psychologists by the time the new school year begins. I don't think that those are positions we can, I don't think we would be wise to postpone hiring those positions just because mental health is and will continue to be a very serious concern during all of this. The money is tough, and trying to figure out the best path here is really hard because, as Larry pointed out, we're not going to get great candidates to choose from if we hire at a strange time of year. So all that by way of saying I support option B because I think it's important to have those positions. Even though it's really hard to do that because I also understand that so many people are losing work. One silver lining though, and then I'll wrap it up, the potential of assistance from the ginormous state fund, it's an unknown, but we will in all likelihood benefit from it in some way. So that will take the edge off, I hope.
That's correct.
Thank you.
We can always cut things. We can always add things, rather. It's very difficult to cut. So I've never ever been able to go Christmas shopping on money I might have. We can leave things out now, and as the money comes in and things change, it's always possible to add things in. We have the superintendent's contingency fund. I'm just tender with people's money right now. I'm on the poor side of this myself, and I just want to make sure that we're not being silly.
Thanks, Barb. Jim, why don't you go ahead?
Sorry, Jenny.
Yeah.
I need you all to know, and I don't know if it makes a difference, I have been kicked out of the meeting on Microsoft Teams, so I'm attending only by phone right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And are you able still to chat or not? No, so you mean you can't chat. So if you
chat.
So what I'll do is I'd like to just go through and make sure we hear from everybody, but then once we have done that, then feel free to just chime in if there's something that you'd like to say, and hopefully we won't get too chaotic. But so far, so good.
Jenny,
I just wanted the point of order for you guys to know.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Gina. And I think I heard Tom as well.
Yes,
Would you like to speak now?
I would. I got kicked off for a few minutes and I panicked, so I'm gonna, I just barged into the conversation in the event that I get kicked off a second time. So, I don't know what all's been said because I missed the last 5 minutes or so. But I'm gonna just speak that I'm looking forward to having option A. And the last person I heard speak about it was Barbara, and I concur with everything that Barbara said. I think that that both of us having backgrounds as teachers, we consider the students a whole great deal in all of these budget hearings. However, our other hat is it belongs to the city taxpayers, and this COVID-19 is so unprecedented. It's very, very difficult for many who are much more professional at it than I to figure out what's going to happen and what kinds of things, especially the effects on the economy, that this is going to have. I know that Jack had mentioned that he felt that the city and the county, and probably noting revenues from the state with regard to lottery, with regard to rooms and meals, and on. I just can't imagine what it's going to be like for some folks at the end of the summer if indeed this goes on that long and they haven't been able to work. So I figure that at this point our school board really owes it to the taxpayers to tighten our belts as much as we can. It's not something that I professionally as an educator would like to do, to lose out on particular staff, but I think that at this point the greater good would be served to go with option A. Okay. And thanks for the time.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And I would like to go to Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, let me thank my fellow board members for the very thoughtful comments. It's obvious that we're all putting in a lot of thought on this and have considered all the different viewpoints. This is probably, if not the toughest, one of the toughest budgets we've had to deal with in my time on the board. As I look through this, I have to agree with the observations that have already been made. I'm leaning, and I'm actually in favor of option A, based on the fact that there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty. I think I'm an optimist in general, and I would like to think that we will be made whole by the federal government and the state government, but I am, there's a lot of things out there yet that I'm very concerned about, and not the least of which is the $900,000 that we got from the state in this biennium, but is by no means guaranteed in the future. So I think Gina's idea on adding some contingency warrants discussion, but right now I'm in favor of option A.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Dave, I think you are the only person left other than Danielle, who I don't think has joined us.
Yeah, I would go with option A. As much as I believe in supporting students, I do think we're in a difficult time, and if we obligate salaries to people, with all due respect to what Larry has to say, I understand. I'm in the hiring mode right now too, and you want to get good people. But if we do hire them, the way it works is that we're obligated to the contract. Sometimes in situations like this, I think you hunker down. I think you get your administrators to do on the line sort of work, calling families. You get everyone focusing on what's important, and be creative with staffing and what the staff does. So. I think it's a great district, but I would go with option A because I think it's the least costly, and we do have to understand that we may not be able to pay for it anyway. So then what do we do? Because taxpayers just may not have the money to pay their taxes, and so we don't know what to expect. So let's hunker down. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Danielle, I just want to check and make sure that you have not joined. And I know she wasn't sure that she would be able to. So I think she's not here. So I will speak.
Let me unmute this in case you gotta talk to them.
I don't think I have much to add to what Barbara and Gina said. I came into this conversation feeling very strongly that we should go with option A. And even if it were possible to reduce it further, I just am so concerned about the community and about the unknowns. And to echo Jim, this is one of the toughest budgets that I can remember, probably the toughest, just because we haven't had the opportunity to do what we've always done well, which is to be creative and to try and work through issues. Just because of the timing, it's been incredibly challenging. And so I'm incredibly appreciative of our administrators for having put together option A and for assuring us that if we go with that option, we will not be impairing the services to our students. And I think that we can trust our administrators on that. I really like Gina's suggestion of being thoughtful about how we fill the positions. And I think my suggestion would be that in terms of approving the contracts that go out today, we absolutely want to approve contracts for anyone who we already have on board, and that includes the compliance officer. And we can have a conversation as a board about the others, the nurses, the CMS teacher. I agree with what Gina said about that. But the other positions, maybe that will be our opportunity to be creative, and maybe at the May meeting we can hear back from our administrators so that we can prioritize what we do with those new positions, because I think that what Chuck and Liza said about the need for the social worker and the psychologist was really compelling. And it may be that even though from a funding perspective we're approving a budget that lists other positions, it may be that those end up being the priority when we have the conversation about what new hires we want to make right now. So that's...
Yeah, can I jump in? That's an excellent point, and I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of the board in looking at that, and I think that gives us some discretion so that we're not married to that, and it puts us in a position of being able to go back and look at all the positions that we're requesting and that you're approving, and then saying, where is the best fit? Is that really the best use of personnel in that particular area? So it gives us a little bit more to think about and more to be sure that we have put into place the right kinds of personnel to help run our programs.
Thank you, Frank. And Larry, did you want to speak?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, great.
Frank, this is Barb. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for understanding sort of where we're all coming from. You know, it's a juggling match sometimes, and every ball is important, but the one that's in the air isn't always the same, or the one everyone wants. And so I appreciate the fact that from an administrative standpoint, you understand and see the need for flexibility and you know, a streamline of thinking in our current situation. So thank you.
Sure. One other...
Jenny,
Go ahead.
no, can I just get it's Chuck, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, Chuck,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah, I just want to get a point of clarification with option A and with option B, because there's been so much talk, and even Gina made a very compelling argument, again, about the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. Clarification, that position is grant funded under option A and option B.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, I thought so. All right, I thought so. I just wanted, because I wanted to be clear, because there's been so many questions about that. So yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
I just wanted to add. Okay, can I go?
Yep.
I wanted to add to the conversation relative to personnel. I mean, Dave, I think, sort of spoke to this, and others did too. And it's not just an issue of a special ed teacher or an administrator or what have you. It's the quality of the person that you're able to get. And I think the good news for us is that we have been able to reach out to a lot of folks that we know throughout the state. So the candidates that we're getting coming in to fill these positions are really, really good. I'm hearing that from a number of folks that I know. Concord, as you also know, has gotten in the news a lot, which is really great, both from Channel 9 and from the Concord Monitor. Thank you, Leah. and also from Tony too at the Concord Patch. And so, attention has been brought to the district in a very positive way. And so you're finding more and more people saying, hey, that sounds like a district I think I'd like to apply to. So we are getting a lot of really good people applying for the positions, and I wanted you guys to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got two board members who've raised their hands. Jim, you raised your hand first, so please go ahead.
Okay, Jenny, I just want to point out, because we've spent a lot of time talking about personnel, and rightfully so, but I would like to point out for the voters and to just reiterate for the board itself is that these are additional positions, and we are able to have this discussion because we have made other cuts in the budget. We're not talking about them now, but we have made reductions that we can talk about adding the people involved in option A at just $40,000 or less, and we have done that because we've been really tight and sharpened our pencils, and I just want that to be mentioned because we have heard a lot of people with regards to their comments on trying to keep things as tight as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And Gina, I think you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I had two things. Am I correct in understanding that if the elementary school, we end up with a psychologist, they're not clinical, they're testing, educational testing for the most part?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. We've had lots of discussion about that. It seems that, in most school districts, that's what they end up doing, but that's not what we want them to do. We want them to be more of a, quote, psychologist and to be doing other kinds of services other than just testing. What's happened in the past, actually, you raised a really interesting point, Gina, and Donna can chime in on this as well. So, you spread the school psychologist out to, let's say, 3 or 4 different buildings, and so that person now doesn't have time to really get to know kids and to be an extra psychologist in terms of offering guidance, support, and other kinds of interventions on behalf of the child. So it ends up being reduced to just the testing modality. And so by having a designated psychologist at a building or 2 gives you more flexibility and more opportunity to use those services in the way that they were actually originally designed for.
Well, the reason I ask, I am all for the social workers and the people on the front lines that are going to be helping the kids make this transition back to brick and mortar schools.
Right.
My child is one of them.
Yeah.
She's going to go kicking and screaming over everybody's dead body. She loves remote.
Yeah.
Put her in her room and put her on her screen, and man, she's as happy as a clam at high tide. So I totally get getting the social workers. I want to be clear that if we're going the route of psychologists, that I really firmly believe we need to make those positions be clinical.
Yes.
As much as they absolutely can, and not testing.
I'm with you 100%, Gina. 100%.
Yes, there's a need for testing too, but that's not where our kids are. I mean, this is traumatic. Talk about trauma, affected learning.
Right.
What we're all going to be looking at when we come back.
No argument.
The other piece that I had was, and I think that Chuck, this may have been where you misunderstood what I was saying. I'm not saying that we should add 0.2 to the teacher of the deaf,
That's 4.
and whether that comes from grant or budget. I'm saying I want 0.4, and maybe 0.2 comes from a grant and 0.2 comes from the budget. I would like to see that teacher of the deaf be full-time.
No, thank you for that. No, thank you, Gina. Thank you. No, I understood your point. No, I understood your point that you were supporting that.
So Jack, were the board to want to adopt Gina's proposal on that, could we do so by adding $32,000 to option A, if that was the option that we went with, and then we would go to 100% with half coming from the grant and half coming from the budget?
Yep.
Just a mechanical question, we could do that, right?
If that's what the board wants.
I would move that we do that, Barb. When the time comes, I would make a motion that we do that.
So, I mean, again,
I would second it.
I'm let's not make the motions yet because we're about to do that. I think Jack has written up motions and they have specific monetary amounts in them. So if that is the board's desire, then we should make a modification to that motion just to make sure we pass the right thing. Are there other board members that would like to speak before anyone makes a motion on the budget?
Jenny, I would.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
So just regarding Gina's last comment, for $32,000, I would absolutely think that we should move in that direction. Thank you.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, I don't know who that was.
Dave.
It's Dave.
Okay, I see you, Dave. Yes, please go ahead, Dave.
You know, when it comes to school psychologists, I think evaluations are very critical. You don't, and the fact that some of these people are doing a lot of testing is not a bad thing. If you don't know what you get, you don't know how to treat it. And we have some wonderful evaluators in Concord, and it's hard for them to also do a whole lot of counseling. But understand, our teachers are counselors, our guidance counselors are counselors, our principals are counselors. We're all counselors when it comes to kids. To get quality evaluations from quality clinical psychologists is really tantamount to a good program. And I wouldn't underestimate the value of that in an educational system. And Concord's got some real good ones. So my observation after working in this field for a while. Thank you.
Dave, thank you. Any other board member comments? See someone has a comment. Let's see. Gina, go ahead. Oh, no, Gina, did you not have your hand up?
You caught me first and then again, so I'm done.
Oh, okay, great.
Jenny, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so I too have read all the emails about how great the teacher for the hearing impaired is. We're raising, or in option A, we are raising that from 0.6 to 0.8, and Gina is saying to raise it another 0.2 for clarification of us as well as the people out there. How many students does this person work with?
I don't know. Is that maybe Donna? Ask Donna.
Oh, I was going to have to take a few minutes because I'm not in my office and I don't have my statistics with me. She does a great deal of consultation, and she does two different jobs. She's partly working with students who have hearing impairments, and she is partly working with students who have needs for what's called AAC, augmentative communication. So her job is bifurcated. So if you guys talk for a few more minutes, I'll see if I can find the totals for you.
Great, thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
I might be able to add a little bit of layman's terms on this. So you have sign language. So any teacher of the hearing impaired will be fluent in ASL, American Sign Language. It's not just people who have hearing loss that utilize sign. Autistic students that are nonverbal utilize sign. So having this type of person in our district, it's not just the one or two completely deaf students or hearing impaired. In my years at Walker School with special ed, there were several times that sign language support was incredibly helpful for me as a learning disability specialist and resource room teacher. So Jim, I don't know if that clarifies it a bit, but it's a bit broader than just children that can't hear.
No, thank you, and that's why I asked how many people were affected by this, because I wanted a really good number to be able to evaluate this on. So
well, and remember, 0.2 of that is a grant. So all we're adding as a school district from our budget is 0.2, not 0.4.
And if I could chime in, I mean, I personally experienced my daughter who attends Ronlet uses a augmented communication device, an AEC device, as the acronym is. Geneva is she's the only expert in the district of how to program that, the best way to utilize it, it's a very scientific process. It's much more complex than I ever knew. And she certainly is the expert. And I mean, my daughter's one person, one individual, one student, one learner. Just the amount of time she has put into that, in full transparency, is just amazing. And her recommendations, have improved her educational experience, but her overall quality of life on a day-to-day basis.
The discussion we're having is exactly why I posed the question. And I wanted it to be clear for everybody.
This is Liza, real briefly. I think it's also important to note that there is probably some number of students who require these services in their IEPs. So we also need to make sure that we're providing this person with enough time to actually meet our requirements under the law.
Yes, Liza, good point. Thank you.
Can I chime in?
Very good point, Liza. Thank you.
Was that Gina?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So, it's not this particular person, but my stepson has actually auditory processing disorder, which he can hear the sound, but he cannot process them in a meaningful way, such that, if you said, go, pick up your socks, pick up your shoes, and meet me at the door, all he's going to get is meet me at the door. The help that he received from the teacher of the deaf when he was in the Concord School District 20-odd years ago was incredible. So it's not just the kids that have difficulty hearing the sounds, but also being able to process, store, and retrieve them. That is a whole other issue that is also on this person's plate.
Thank you, Gina. So I think this is a great discussion, and I agree with the other board members that the letters that we received were very, very compelling, both around this individual and around the services and the value of the services. I think my only question about it is we did have our administrators come forward with a specific proposal that was point 8, and it's so difficult for us to, as a board, balance the needs without having kind of the background. I mean, I know we all have different backgrounds, but to balance everything as a package, I think that's my only question and caution, and maybe is behind Jim's question about how many people will benefit from this. It's so hard for us to be making these decisions somewhat in a vacuum. So, I mean, I absolutely will go with whatever the board decides on this, but just wanted to make that note. And I don't know if we can get some confirmation from our administrators that clearly there is a need for these services. I mean, I know that everyone saw these letters. That we could accommodate the additional point 2.
Okay, so this is Donna. I'm back from counting and looking at my documents.
Good.
So Jeannie has a really large caseload, and it's hard to describe it because it's a little different than other of our folks. And you guys have done a nice job, people who have a direct experience with her from your own children or from other people who've experienced that. So she has about 50 students on her hard of hearing caseload. So, but that can be a challenge because some of them she might consult very intermittently on their equipments, making sure their equipment is properly set up, and then some that she does more direct work with. And then she has 36 students on her AAC, on her augmentative communication caseload. And so those are, again, students that she might consult with, that she might help with initial sense of the right devices, and then be coming back and consulting. Some students are on IEPs, some students are on 504 plans. There would always be a plan for that student that she'd be working with one way or the other. And certainly full-time would not be impossible. I don't know what her interest is in terms of this particular person in terms of her own work. Originally, the point 8 was what was recommended by Mr. Belmont, but certainly the numbers are large.
So it's, I mean, what you're saying, Don, it does seem to me, from a layperson's perspective, to support what we're hearing from the parents, which is it seems like this is a person who there is plenty of work to support the full time, although that wasn't what was brought forward. Would you be comfortable saying that, or do you can't really tell?
There's no doubt in my mind that that a full-time job could be done by this person, and she has plenty of work to do. And so, again, I think we tried to spread things out amongst a few different positions, but if there's the will, certainly a full-time position would be amazing for this individual who's, as you've been hearing, very talented and very busy. And
So-
I think that finding that money through a grant, the other point two from a grant would be, we're hoping realistic, understanding that we don't find out how much we get in these grants until not for a few more months. But it's not a huge amount of money, so we're hoping that we could do that.
Yeah, so I'd like to jump in and say that why don't we do this then, that we'll plan to increase the budget by the $32,000 to cover the initial point two, and then the other point two to make it full-time will come from the grant. And I believe Jack said that additional point two would only be about 22,000. Yeah, 22,000 or so. So it's a little bit less. And I mean, as Donna said, the grants are always in flux, so to speak. We're never sure, but usually in this particular case, we should be amply covered to cover a $22,000 issue.
And if I could just chime in too, Donna makes an excellent point about this person's personal interest. I don't know her interest. I mean, not at all. And whether she wants to be full-time or .8 or her personal situation. So I do think, given she is so talented and the letters we've got from parents, I mean, certainly I would hope that would be a factor. We wouldn't want it to work against her.
No.
Thank you.
Good point, Chuck.
So I think this has been a good discussion. Is there any more discussion, or is someone prepared to make a motion?
Jack's ready with his pen.
I'll make a motion.
Well, if it's...
Jack, do you have the language for the motion?
Yep, I'm going to just disconnect my screen for a minute, okay? Just so I can put up the correct motion. You can see what is on the screen, correct?
I can see your face.
Oh, we don't want to do that. How about now? Do you see my screen?
Jack?
Do you see my screen?
I just see your face right now.
Okay, you know what? Oh, all right. It's because, you know what? I stopped the sharing. 1 second. Let me just fix this. I don't want that on there. Okay, so it doesn't have a name. Okay, 1 second. Let me just trying to coordinate my share here.
Yep.
Got it. They got it, I think.
Share is this it?
I thought you already hit it.
No. Do you see what's on my screen now? It says 0.6 to 0.8.
Hearing specialist, FTE.
Yep. So this is what you will pick up, and then this is the total amount's going to be 55. So the grant's going to need another 22,813 to bring it for another 55,000. That's the total add when you add the 0.4.
Okay.
All right. So this is general fund. That's the 32,000 we amounted.
Right.
This will be the grant.
Right.
To bring it to a total add of that. Okay.
So I'm gonna do my best here. I move.
Well, no. Hold on. I got the easy, Pilgrim.
Sorry, getting all excited.
Let me close that down. That'll stop the share. Let me put the motion on there. I just got to put it up and then share it. 1 second here. Because it says it right on the top.
I'm
And
supposed to memorize those numbers.
no,
Okay.
that's okay. Share.
I think he's got words and everything.
I do. I did the
Unbelievable.
quick math, so I think I'm good. I just want to make sure that I have it up here. Does it say option A plus 0.2 hearing impaired on your screen?
Oh,
Yes.
I got.
Option A plus .2.
All right. So the numbers have been adjusted to reflect that.
That's good, Jack. Wow.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Just read
Okay.
it.
So I can read this now. It's my
Yep.
turn.
That's
Yep.
it. It's all you.
Okay. Do I have to read all of this?
Yep.
All right. I will. Okay. I move that the school board adopt a budget for fiscal year 2021 in the amount of $93,396,000 $10, with a general fund budget of $87,702,296, appropriating $53,411, I don't know what I'm reading.
Million.
In local taxes and $7,495,955 in state taxes, inclusive of the following deposits and withdrawals to existing funds or expendable trust funds. Here are our deposits. Vocational Capital Reserve Fund for an amount of up to $193,918. Facilities and Renovation Trust Fund for an amount up to $1,417,746. Food Service Fund for an amount up to $20,000. Renovation and Maintenance Trust Fund for an amount up to $98,665. And also inclusive of the following withdrawals from expendable trust funds to fund appropriations. Special Education Expendable Trust Fund for an amount up to $100,000. Vocational Capital Reserve for an amount up to $125,000. Instructional Trust for an amount up to $50,000. Health Risk Management Reserve for an amount up to $100,000.
Very good, Jeff.
Thank you, Barb.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tom.
So moved by Barb, seconded by Tom, and again, the one number that, let me just read it to make sure it's on the record.
Yeah.
The appropriation is $53,411,211 in local taxes.
Correct.
Thank you, Jenny.
It's tough.
Yeah. So many comments.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Dave, that looks like you have your hand up.
No.
Nope. Okay.
I do.
Gina, go ahead.
I'd still like to discuss perhaps amending the motion to include that we do not fund those positions immediately, but that they are discretionary as we move forward through this COVID-19 process. What I don't want is I don't want the school district, as Dave said, to contract with people and then it turns out that we don't need those services because we don't know what the future looks like right now. And also that there may not be what the new superintendent feels are the priorities.
So I think the question would be, how do we word that? I think it would not be that we do not fund, but rather that we do not fill.
Oh no, I didn't say fund. That we do not hire.
That we do not fill.
We don't hire somebody.
Yes. So I guess the question is, Jack, can you show us the slide that has the positions in it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm kicked out, so you guys will have to tell me what it says.
Well, my question is going to be for Jack. I mean, I think that the question is whether we need to include it within the motion or have maybe a separate vote following adopting the budget. Because I think adopting the budget is a specific and formal process.
If I could jump in, I think what you want to do is have two motions. The first one is to adopt the budget with the way it's been presented in that motion. Secondly, a second motion would be to direct the administration to, I don't know where to find the right words here, but to be cautious about the hiring, we got to find right words here. You really want us to be careful and wait to see how things play themselves out to a certain degree. Now, my only hesitation there is, I think Larry already raised this point, you have to watch out because at a certain point you're going to lose the ability to hire quality people because you've gone past the threshold. So, maybe, I know what I want to say, that your motion advises the administration to be discretionary in terms of hiring any positions until at least 30 days so we have a better understanding of what we're looking at in terms of the future of our schools. I mean, that would be one way to go, and that way I could still advertise for the positions, I could still interview, I could have everybody set, but it gives us 30 more days to kind of think things through and see where we're at.
Jeff, can I comment?
Yeah, hang on, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Who was speaking?
Yeah, David.
Yep, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah,
not an island. All the state is in the same situation. There will be quality people out there looking for jobs because some districts are not going to be able to afford anywhere near what we're going to be able to afford. So I don't think it's unreasonable at all to, to put these on some hold. And there will be good people out there, guaranteed. There'll be many people looking for work.
I don't know, I don't know.
I understand what you're saying as well, but I do think that we have to be careful to not obligate a huge salary to somebody that may not work.
No, this is Larry. This is Larry. We would only do that if we offered a contract. So if we don't offer a contract, we would not be on the hook to pay them.
Right.
But I don't know that we necessarily need a motion to have the board to have the administration hold off. It could
Good
just
point.
be an agreement. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it needs to be part of this
That's
budget
fine.
process,
Yeah,
you
it's a
know
good
what I mean?
point.
Right.
So here's my.
I would agree, Larry.
So my suggestion is, I think, that we move forward, take a vote on the budget, and then take up the question of in what manner the board wishes to direct the administration with respect to the filling of positions that are new positions. And I think we can have that conversation. Maybe it'll be a motion, maybe it won't, but I think it can be a separate motion from the actual budget motion. I think it will be a cleaner process if we do that.
I agree. I support that. Yeah.
So Jim, I think you had your hand up, is that true?
Yeah, I did, and I agree with you. The comment I was going to make was with regards to what will be your second motion. So I will hold off on that until we discuss that at that time.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. So we do have a motion. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Can I make a comment? Yeah, I would like to make a comment, Jim.
No, please go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, I'm going to support option A, and my colleagues on the school board have made a compelling argument. And I understand that we don't want to place any undue burden on taxpayers or individuals, especially during these very uncertain times. With that said, I do have to, and again, I'm going to vote yes, but with that said, I do have to go on the record of saying I am concerned, and I think, Gina, you made a fine point of, I believe it's your daughter going back to school is going to be traumatic when we go back to brick and mortar schools. I think we're going to have some trauma on the other side to deal with. So I am concerned about student services in that regard, both with psychologists, social workers, whether the psychologist test or not. I think there's a balance and a fine line. But I am very concerned about that, and maybe that can be part of our further discussion of holding off on hiring the additional people to maybe look at those positions somewhat strategically. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chuck. Any other discussion on the motion? So seeing none, I will call the roll. So all in favor of the motion on the budget that was moved by Barb, seconded by Tom, which was option A with the addition of 32,000 and change for the hearing impaired teacher. So first, Ms. Cannon.
Aye.
Mr. Croto.
Aye.
Mr. Crush.
Aye.
Ms. Higgins.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Poinier.
Aye.
Mr. Richards.
Aye.
Ms. Smith. I do not believe is present. Ms. Patterson votes aye. So the motion passes 8-0. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to the administrators. Should we have the discussion of the second motion and the direction? We have the slide in front of us in terms of the positions is there someone who would like Jim? I think you had a comment on that, and maybe Gina does as well.
Sure, Jenny. My only comment is, while I am all in favor of giving some discretion and with the administration, there are some positions that I think are imperative that we go forward with, not the least of which is the safety compliance officer, as well as the nurse. And so I just want to make sure that we address those key positions and then leave some discretion with regards to perhaps the special education and the social workers in that respect. I also want to make sure that we have the classroom teacher for the Crystal McCullough School. I think that's imperative to keep our class sizes within our guidelines. That was my only comment, and I'm open to other people's discussion.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in for a second? So
Yes, go ahead.
to Jim's point, I think instead of a motion, can we just have a gentleman's agreement that the administration will take discretion in terms of hiring any of these positions? I mean, I heard what Jim said. We feel the same way. Obviously, we're not going to touch the compliance officer. We've hired that individual. She's an absolute superstar, and that's great. And there are other positions too. The nurse's position, we're going to do that. We have someone in place right now. I know she's applying for the full-time position, and I have every expectation she'll get it, and she's great. So those will be non-discussable issues. As to the other positions, the 3 special ed, and whether we actually go with those or how we might want to rethink those, that's where the discretion will come into play. But I think what you're asking me is to hold off for 30 days or so and get back to you and say, we have our candidates, here's what we're thinking, and here's what the state is saying in terms of how things look in the future. And at that point, we can make a decision about whether we go or not. But I think what we're saying is that we're going to give 30 days or so to think this through, and that allows us time to continue to do what we do, which is to go through the hiring process and have people lined up, but then I'll get back to you and say, here's where we're at, here's what we think, and here's what the state is saying at this point in time. And then we can make a decision at that point as to where we need to go.
Great. Thank you, Frank. And I mean, that makes sense to me. Tom has raised his hand, and other board members may have thoughts on this as well. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Jenny. So, Frank, you sort of took the words right out of my mouth. I know that we think very highly of you and your administration. I think it's important for us to give you the leeway that you need to work through this educationally, and I would absolutely concur with what you've just said.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I think someone may have raised their hand.
Yeah,
Dave?
can I make one comment? And that is, will we know in 30 days what the decisions will be? That's the only question I had. Do we want to put a precise timeline on that? And I agree with what Tom says. I have a great deal of respect for this administration, but I just don't know if 30 days is going to be enough. If it is, great. If it isn't, then again, you'll have to demonstrate discretion in terms of where this is going.
We have our monthly meeting, and that's in less than 30 days, so I think that we'll direct the administration to give us an update at that time, and then we can have a further discussion of it.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I mean, we're meeting on May 4th, and so that's about, 3 weeks away? So that'll be one conversation, and then we can certainly, I mean, what's today's date? Today is the 13th. So, I mean, so somewhere around May 15th, May 18th, that would be that following Monday, I believe. So I can get back to you guys on Monday the 18th if we're still in abeyance as to what we're going to do.
Jenny? I agree with that.
Yeah, Jenny, this is Jim.
So, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I am fine with Frank's gentleman's and gentlewoman's agreement on this, and I don't necessarily think we need a motion on it.
Thank you.
Great.
And Jenny, this is Chuck. I totally concur, and I trust the discretion and the strategic planning of our current administration and leadership who've done an excellent job. So absolutely, I think that sounds like a fine plan.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. And I want to ask Gina, because this was originally her idea, to make sure she's comfortable with it.
I agree with a gentleman or gentlewoman's agreement. I'm not convinced that 30 days will do it. And one of the things that I really want everyone to be mindful of is that we are asking a new superintendent to come in. And this may or may not align with what he or she feels are the priorities. So we need to keep that in mind.
Yes. Thank you, Gina. And we will be I think number one, we'll revisit this at our main meeting where we have a number of things that we are wanting to make sure that we are being mindful of. And we also, hopefully by then we'll have a better sense of the process for the new superintendent coming in. So hopefully it will all come magically together, but I guess we'll see.
Okay, who's hiding the magic wand?
They're hiding it really well.
Okay,
Okay, I think,
we're good.
Jack, are we set in terms of the budget at this point?
Yep.
Do you have, great. So I think we'll move on to the 20 and 21 administrator and teacher contracts. This is for renewal, so separate from the discussion that we just had, and I will ask Larry to speak to that.
Thank you, Jen. All of these documents are in the shared drive, in the Google Drive under full board, if you haven't seen them already. I do have administrator and teacher nominations, but first, we have an annual leave of absence request from Frank Harrison. He's a science teacher at the high school, and he typically will take 20% of his position and become the rope instructor. That stands for realizing our potential.
Oh, he does it every year?
So he does that and then continues with 80% of his science position. So I would first ask that you approve his request for a 20% leave of absence, at which point you'll see, you'll be approving his rope position here. Next.
I move we approve that.
Okay, that was Barb, right?
Yep.
Barb, is there a second on approving the leave of absence?
Second.
Second.
I heard Chuck. So give it to Chuck. Any discussion on leave of absence? All right, I will call the roll. Ms. Cannon.
Aye.
Mr. Proto.
Aye.
Mr. Fresh.
Aye.
Ms. Higdon.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Poinier.
Aye.
Mr. Richards.
Aye.
Ms. Smith, still not here, I believe, and Ms. Patterson votes aye. So the leave of absence is approved.
Okay, thank you. Next are some teacher nominations. These are existing teachers moving into new positions within the district. So I want to do those separately, and then we'll talk about the ones, we'll have you look at the ones that are coming back in their current positions. So first we have Natasha Berlin as a reading teacher at the high school. She's on step 14 of the Masters Plus 30 track at 88,304. Tom Crumrine, science teacher at Concord High School. He's at step 14 of the Masters track at 85,605. Frank Harrison Jr., 20% rope teacher. This is a one-year-only position. He's on step 14 of the Masters track at 17,121. Emily Bemis, a reading teacher at Renwick Middle School. She's at step 14 of a Masters on the Masters track at 85,605. Caitlin Schofield, a classroom teacher at Broken Ground. She's on step 7 of the Bachelor's track. And Heather Silvera, a classroom teacher at Millbrook School, step 7 of the Masters track at 64,957.
Okay, so this is the teachers who are moving into new positions. Are there any questions from board members on any of these nominations? So seeing none, is there a motion to approve the teachers in new positions?
My motion,
Barb?
make that motion, or whoever.
I got Jim on the motion. And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Barb. And this is the, sorry, I'm trying to write it down on the spreadsheet. So this is the teachers in new positions. Is there any discussion?
Where do I find the documentation on this? I'm not following because I've been kicked out of the meeting.
It's on the Google Drive. It's on their full board. And then it'll be an April 13th special board meeting.
Yeah, I don't have that. So
I know it's harder when we're not physically in the boardroom.
It is.
I'm not able to access it either because I just don't want to overload my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I don't have anything called full board.
So, Dina, would you like Larry to go through and put that up on the screen
No.
so you can read it?
No, I'm kicked out of the meeting. I'm attending by phone.
Oh, okay.
So, no, never mind. I will trust my colleagues.
Okay. Thank you, Dina. Any other questions on this motion? So, seeing none, I will call the roll on the teachers and new positions. Ms. Cannon,
Aye.
Mr. Proto,
Aye.
Mr. Frupp,
Aye.
Ms. Higgins,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Fournier,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
and Ms. Patterson votes aye. So teachers and new positions are approved 8-0.
Okay. Then we have a 10-page report of the returning teachers in their existing roles for the CEA, teachers group.
Okay, and we will not ask you to read all of those names.
I appreciate that.
As enumerated, that's all I have to say.
Is there a motion to approve the returning CEA nomination?
It's on the screen now. So I don't know. Jack, are you doing that?
I am.
All right. You're behind the scenes.
I'll make the motion to approve the CEA nominations for the coming school year, as per Larry's recommendation of the 10 pages of personnel.
Make it simpler, just say as enumerated.
As enumerated. That sounds even better. Yeah.
I'll second that.
That was Tom on second?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on the CEA nomination? So seeing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Cannon,
Actually, in good conscience, I'm going to abstain because I have no information.
okay. Mr. Proto,
Aye.
Mr. Crush,
Aye.
Ms. Higgins,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Fournier,
Aye.
Mr. Richards,
Aye.
and Ms. Patterson votes aye. So that is approved 7-0 with 1 abstention.
Jenny, excuse me, could you repeat who motioned and seconded that?
Yep, it was moved by Chuck and seconded by Tom.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. And next, the nominations for the central office administration. We have a vacancy at the superintendent's office beginning July 1. Donna Pally, assistant superintendent. Robert Belmont, director of student services. Matt Cashman, director of facilities. Terry Crotty, director of transportation. Jack Dunn, business administrator. Karen Fisher Anderson, a school safety compliance officer. Pamela McLeod, director of technology. Yours truly, Larry Prince, director of human resources. And Donna Reynolds, the director of food service.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions on the central office nomination?
So we have to approve those as a lump sum? Like
You
all
don't have to.
together?
Typically, yes, that's what we do, yep.
Okay, that's, all right.
I mean, there have been times where where someone has a conflict, where we'll pull one out, but typically we approve them together. So, is there a motion to approve the central office administrators? I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Tom?
It is.
Okay. Any discussion? So seeing none, I will.
Yes, Jenny,
Yep.
I would just like to thank all of the administrators on this list for stepping up in our times of difficulty in these last few months. We have struggled, and we have started to come through, and it's due in large part to the names on this document right in front of us. And I just wanted to express my appreciation.
Thank you, Tom. I agree.
In light of our struggles, actually, I'm good. Never mind.
Any other comment on this motion? So seeing none, I will call the roll on the central office administrators. Ms. Cannon?
Having no documentation, I must abstain.
Mr. Croto? Mr. Croto, I'm not hearing you. Are you on mute?
My apologies. Aye.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Krebs?
Aye.
Ms. Higgins?
No.
Mr. Parker?
Nay.
Ms. Poinier?
Aye.
Mr. Richards? I think you're on mute, Mr. Richards.
Aye.
And Ms. Patterson votes aye. So central office administrators are approved 5 to 2 with 1 abstention.
Okay, and the last order of business, the administrators at the building level. These are members of the Concord Administrators Association, the CAA. I can read them if you like. They're on the screen, should be in a minute. We do have a couple of vacancies. We have a vacancy at the high school as for an assistant principal. We have a vacancy at Runlet Middle School for an assistant principal. We have a vacancy at Abbott Downing and Krista McCullough. That's due to the fact that these are one-year only positions. And the CEA grievance on the assistant principals is still pending, I assume. So these folks will take a leave of absence and be recommended in May. That would be Laura Beth Ulwick and Carol McCarthy. And then we have a vacancy at Broken Ground due to the retirement of Nancy Pender.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Any questions on the CAA nominations?
Yeah, this is Chuck. Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
I think Dave, did you want to speak first? No.
That's fine.
Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, okay, thank you. Laura, do you anticipate the grievance for the assistant principals being resolved in May? Is that the anticipation?
Yes, we do. I'll take care of that. I assure you that will be resolved before we meet in May.
Okay, thank you.
So long as it's resolved fairly, I support a resolution.
How would it not be fairly?
Why do pardon me, what is this in regard to?
The CEA they filed a grievance because they did not agree that we hire assistant principals at the elementary level. We had CEA folks in those seats as special ed coordinators.
All right.
And they
Okay,
felt.
now I remember. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Was there another question?
Okay, vote.
So I'm hearing from Danielle that she will not be able to make the meeting. So that's that. Just to let people know why my phone was singing.
So I have a quick comment, and nothing can be done about this now. I'm sitting here very uncomfortable that we sort of lump approve a wide variety of administrators altogether, when there could be very specific reasons why some have, a no-brainer to be approved, and others maybe there are some questions. So perhaps in the future we can look at approval of central office staff in a different manner. I'm just throwing that out there. I know nothing can be done about it, but I just feel that my constituents and taxpayers and folks in the know who know what I stand for know that I'm feeling very uncomfortable with having to lump approve everybody. I'm just not good with it.
Jenny, this is Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I just want to, I want to agree with Barb. I think that's a great proposal. I think it's a good proposal for transparency.
Yeah, let me chime in as well. I think, in many districts that I've been associated with in the past, there's an evaluation done on the central office staff, usually at the time when the contract comes up. And so that individual then would be presented to the board in non-public, and there'd be opportunity for discussion about the pros and cons of that particular individual. That way the board has more of an understanding of, what that individual has done, where they're going, and whether they feel that's something that they want to continue with. The same would hold true for the building principals too. Don't forget, in most districts you don't have unions for your administrators, and so each year then the superintendent would come before the board and talk about them. Here, because of the unions, that they come in a sort of a full slate of individuals. But that doesn't preclude the board from saying we'd like to see in the future evaluations of these individuals before we decide on voting them through.
Yes, thank you, Frank. I think it's just this sort of blanket acceptance, and it makes me just feel like I'm not really being honest with myself and doing really what I think is best. So thank you.
Call it out. Just call it out.
And if I could comment, I like.
Call it out.
Can I comment?
So I just want to get people one at a time. Was that? I'm not sure who that was. Was that
Dave.
Larry?
It was maybe somebody after me, but anyway, I can wait my turn.
No, I'm all set, Jen.
Okay. So
I'm ready.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, I was elected to the board because there was some concern over some of the administrators' decision making, and as Barb says, and as Frank has suggested, putting these all into a lump sum is difficult for me. I have a lot of respect for everyone on that list, but I do not, as an elected board member, feel that I can support this decision because it lumps them all together. And some I feel, especially given the fact that the report is now in the hands of the Attorney General, that we may be looking at some new administrative positions. And so this is a difficult decision that I am not going to be able to vote in favor of because they are all lumped together. We have no evaluation process to look at their performance. So this is really difficult, and I think a real problem for us. Thank you.
So clearly this is illustrating another way where we need to look at our practices and figure out a better way to do it going forward. And I think Frank has some suggestions about that. I don't know what people think we should do right now for today. And Frank, do you have any suggestions?
And Jenny, then if I can make a comment when you have time.
Well, let Chuck make his comment, then I'll say my piece.
Okay, this one's good. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you. So, and my comment is, look, I do agree with, I'd like to look at doing it a different way. I am not comfortable, though, publicly discussing. I like what Frank said about having some conversations in non-public. I'm not comfortable publicly discussing any administrator, good or bad, and I think we have a great administrative team, so please don't misunderstand. But I'm not comfortable discussing anyone's performance publicly. Thank you.
Yeah, all I was going to say, Jenny, was that I think going forward we need to have a plan in place where the board gets an opportunity to review where each administrator is at, and there's a narrative, and you actually most superintendents will develop an actual schema, so you have an understanding of what the individual has done and under what conditions and under what timelines. And so that way the board is in a better position to understand the quality of that particular administrator, and then can make obviously a good decision about moving forward or not. But at least you have in non-public session an opportunity to have a in-depth conversation with the superintendent about a particular administrator and the whys and wherefores behind that.
No, thank you. I think it's a great suggestion. I think it is something we should do going forward. I think it's a little hard to figure out a way to do it right now, having not planned for it. So
That was not my reason for bringing it up. I just wanted it out there. We can't do anything right now.
Yeah, no, agreed.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting this should be a public discussion either. Thank you.
Great. So I think this is a great discussion. I do think we should probably move forward in the interest of just accomplishing our business under a challenging time frame. So I will ask for a motion to approve the CAA administrative.
I will make the motion to approve the CAA administrative list as enumerated.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chuck. Is there a second?
I will second it.
I didn't catch who that was who seconded.
Jim?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Is there any discussion of the CAA administrators?
Only that I still don't have any information or documentation.
Okay, thank you, Gina.
Gina, this is Lyndon. Do you not have access to the internet on your computer?
That's not what she means.
I can get out to the internet. I can get to SAU. I cannot get to what you are talking about.
Do you know where the Google Drive is for the board?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so you don't have access on your end?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just was hoping I could help.
Yep.
Yeah, no, unfortunately.
And that's another thing that we should work on before we have the next meeting. Let's just do what we can to make sure that everybody has access to these documents, preferably ahead of time so that we can look at them prior to the meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So any further discussion on the CAA administrator? So I will call the roll. Ms. Cannon?
I've got to abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Crodo?
Aye.
Mr. Crush?
Aye.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Mr. Parker?
Nay.
Ms. Poinier?
Aye.
Mr. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Smith? I don't think that she's one. Just checking. Ms. Patterson votes aye. So the CAA administrators are approved 1, 2, 3,
6-1.
4, 5, 6 to 1 with
One abstention.
Thank you.
All right. So Larry, are there more or is that all of them?
That's all of them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next agenda item is the spring 2020 school calendar and possible COVID-19 emergency changes. And Frank, this is your item, so you go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. As I wrote to you all, I've been approached by some parents, not a lot, but the list is growing, about perhaps not having April vacation, and obviously there are pros and cons to that. You should know there are some school systems that are not having April vacation. Merrimack and Bow, I believe, are two, and there are others that don't have the list in front of me. The pluses are in terms of parents saying to me that, look, we're in the zone, we understand how this works, we can't go anywhere during April vacation, so for us it's nice to be able to continue. Now, I put out a survey to the faculty because I really need to know what they think. I've heard from some faculty just anecdotally that I'm looking forward to the break. Others have said I just assume, continue through. So let's wait to see what they have to say. I know the governor's making an announcement, I believe, by this Friday, and the leaning is that he's probably not going to have school resume for the remainder of the year. So there are really three possible choices for us. One is that we have April vacation, as I've already stated. I want to make that clear. I did state that in my letter to the community and to the to staff. So that would just stay as it is, and our final day would be, I want to say, June 11th or so. Option 2, which some districts are doing, which is to say, let's have Monday and Friday be days off, if you will, so it's a long weekend, and so only 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, would be days in service where students and teachers are working. If that be the case, then you could take 3 days off the calendar, plus the 1 day that we gave up for teacher workshop when we're putting the remote learning program into play. That would bring the final day of school back to June 5th, which is a Friday. And then there's one other option, which is not to have any April vacation whatsoever, and then I could bring the vacation of the final day back to, I want to say, June 3rd, which is a Tuesday. So those are the options that are available to us, and we can certainly write to the commissioner and see what his thoughts are as well. I know there's a lot of districts that are trying to figure out what the best way to go is. So those are the options that I'm looking at. I've obviously made no decision. I wanted to consult with you all to see what your position was. And also, I'm really concerned about where the faculty lie in this, because I don't want them to be overtaxed. I don't want them to feel like, oh my God, this is just too much of a burden. So that is a concern. And obviously, we want to make sure our faculty are well taken care of. And to that end, I do want to say this. I know it's been brought up before, but I think it's important for the public to know as well. Most of the faculty have worked well. Overtime is not the right word for it. I mean, they've been working weekends. They've been working all hours to try and make this thing work. This is not an easy task to get the remote learning to work for every kid and every grade level. And we're still, Donna will tell you, we're still working out the bugs in terms of where things, don't quite meet the expectations that we'd like to have. But teachers have really put in a lot of effort and a lot of time. You may have heard the commissioner had cited us as being one of the very best in the state of New Hampshire in terms of doing remote learning. We actually got a shout out at his last commissioners meeting talking about Concord School District in particular, about how well our remote learning is going. So, make no mistake about it, it's a good program and people have done well, but teachers have put in a great deal of time to make this thing work.
So as one of 2 board members who currently runs a school, and the only board member that's actively teaching right now, my feeling with this, Frank, is that you should have the latitude to make the decisions as they come. You can't sit here tonight and decide what makes sense about April vacation that's 2 weeks down the road.
Right.
Because 2 weeks ago, life was very different than it is now.
Well said.
So my suggestion would be that we as a board support your ability to make the decisions that make sense when the time comes to make them.
Thank you.
I have observation on this. Run at school. I think that families and students, if I'm looking at the needs of students, they need their routines, they need people in schools. Their expectations are that they will have April vacation. The faculty's expectations are that they will have April vacation. I have no way of judging whether Concord High is better than Bedford or better than Laconia in terms of how they're dealing with this, or so it's hard for me to judge, but I think under extreme circumstances, you stay with what you know, and we know we have a vacation coming up that's been planned for a long time. If people are working really hard, a break would be nice. I also think that ending school early, again, puts a lot of kids at risk. School, if you ask most kids, what do they want? They want to be back in school, but the fact that they don't have school, at least they have contact with people that mean a lot in their lives, their faculty, their counselors, or other things. So based on just making a shorter school year doesn't really work in favor of the kids who need our help, who need our support, who want us there. But keep with routines. That's what they need, and I think what families need. Sure, I think a couple families are stressed out because they now realize how hard it is to teach kids. But I don't think that's enough reason to stop with what's expected in routines. And again, with regard to what Bart said, I don't disagree that every week is a new situation, but I would highly recommend that we stay with our routines. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Dr. Bass. I mean, I agree with what Barb said. I think that Dr. Bass is the best student to make this decision, but I also think if there are board members who have input, particularly we've heard from those who've got some real expertise here, and hopefully that's helpful. If a vote would be helpful from your perspective, Dr. Bass, I'm happy to call one, but I don't know that we.
No, I don't need a vote. Again, just wanted to get your input and kind of see where you all were at. And again, I'm more interested, to be honest with you, with what the faculty have to say, because they're the ones that are really, putting this all together. So that's going to be a real telltale sign for me.
Just another comment. I was in touch with the commissioner's office today.
Yeah.
And he gave us, through his secretary, no indication that he wants to end school early. His concern more is when are we letting kids into, we're going to let kids back in our buildings. But from what I understand, he's not talking about ending the school calendar early. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, who is that?
Gina.
Yes, go ahead, Gina.
So I get the luxurious position of having both a child in school, so to speak, and a husband teaching remote.
Mm-hmm.
And while the child would love to plow right through, again, she's an out-of-district kid. She loves the screen. She's totally happy. She's eating up life with a very large ladle right now because she can be on her screen. The husband needs a break. The intensity, the grading. I mean, he's on the screen all day answering emails and questions from his students, and when he's not doing that, he's doing lesson plans, and when he's not doing that, he's grading stuff, and when he's not doing that, he's trying to do advising, and when he's not doing that, he's trying to counsel kids that are stressed. Just from the spouse perspective, I think that teachers may well need a break.
Okay, thank you.
This is Liza. Could I make a quick comment, please?
Yep.
Please, Liza, go ahead.
From a teacher perspective, I think that Dr. Best is on the right track. Let's ask him from a parent perspective. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and have the vacation. One big reason for me is that I don't need summer starting on June 5th. Not to sound crass about it, but that's, any time before the set time is unplanned time that is, it's just more difficult. And so at least with vacation, April vacation is different from summer vacation. Summer vacation, you want to be, depending on the work situation in the home, you're looking for camps and childcare and all kinds of things. Whereas it seems like, as several people have said, April's already built in. Let's just do a vacation and carry on.
No, that's a good point. I have heard that from other parents as well, that not so much concerned about the April vacation, but concerned about an early release in June, because they've already planned out how that's going to play out. And so the June 11th date would be more applicable to what they have had already put into play versus, getting out on June 2nd or June 3rd or whatever that date might be. So that does create some problems for a lot of parents, no question about it.
Chuck, did you want to speak?
Yeah, as I sit here and certainly my daughter does not enjoy remote learning whatsoever. If I told her she could drive to school, she'd probably figure out how to drive and be back in the morning. With that said, and my poor wife is struggling trying to be a teacher, which she's as we both said, we're bright people, but we're not educators, and we have painfully learned that quickly. With that said, and I guess my ramblings are I've heard everybody's comments, and I've thought, and, I think I'm going to defer to Dr. Bass and the faculty. I mean, look, I think it would be nice to have a break at the end of April from a parent standpoint and kind of just get off the gas a little bit because we're figuring it out day by day. And there's some days we're more successful than others, and other days we don't feel like we accomplished much at all in our situation. And it might be nice to kind of take a step back and reassess and take a breather. On the other hand, you know what? I can see the need to just plow right through. So I'm going to defer to Dr. Bass and the faculty. I will make one comment that no matter what you decide, you're going to make people mad.
It's like a snow day. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think this is one of those situations where you're kind of between, so to speak, a rock and a hard place. So you know what? You'll have my support whatever you decide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other comments from board members?
Just whatever you decide, Dr. Bass, I'm fine with.
Thank you.
And Jenny, I support Dr. Bass, but I do think I agree with it's a good time for people, both teachers, parents, and students to catch a breath and catch up.
Thank you,
Great.
Jim.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Is there anything else that you need from us?
Nope, I think we're good. Jack, we're good?
Oh, I think that's it. So that
Any other
was,
business that we missed?
there's the balance of the agenda on the screen. Do you see that?
It looks like we're almost done, and I'm very excited about that. Any other business that anyone thinks we need to talk about today?
There's, on the agenda, there's not a specified public comment period.
We had public comment earlier, and we did
Nobody
not
was
have
there.
any members of the public who wished to comment. We want to get the public comment in before,
Voting.
on agenda items, but other than that, we were not seeking public comment.
Makes sense.
Yep, thank you. So, seeing no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Barb, seconded by Jim. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.